Okay, so good morning. We're going to begin. We're going to begin today's Parsha class, today's Torah class, based on yesterday's reading. And it is yesterday we read the portion of Shemini. So the week before spoke about the 7 days of inauguration, that there were 7 days where basically it was a trial run. So the sequence of events was as follows. Moshe gave the Torah. He brought down the 10 commandments, 10 principles, 10 fundamentals, and as opposed to the 10 suggestions. And he came down, and as you know, the rest of the story, he broke the tablets. Then he had to go up, and because of the worship of the golden calf, God said, "Okay, well, now you're going to need a temple. Now you're going to need something to atone." And they built it, the Mishkan, in the desert. It was portable. They were able to transport it one place to the other, etc. And then when it was finally complete, God told Moses, "Okay, you for 7 days you got to do this trial run, and then on the 8th day you give it to your brother, becomes the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. But for the first 7 days, you're the de facto Kohen Gadol." And so the question is why? And the answer is, when God and Moses met at the burning bush, the bush that was not consumed, which is basically, this symbolizes the Jewish people. You can try and burn us, but you're not going to kill us. You're not going to destroy us. I mean, completely. He sent Moses to go to Egypt, and Moses refused to go. Moses came up with different things. Who am I that you should send? Send somebody better than I. I have a lisp or speech impediment. I am, there is, they won't believe me. What should I tell them your name? God, this is like too ethereal and esoteric. It's these people are slaves. They're being beaten. Now's no time for spirituality. And this took place for 7 days. And finally, God said, "You know what? Aaron is already on his way to meet you, and together you'll go." So for Moses, from the 7 days that Moses argued with God, debated with God, was the 7 days that he was allowed to be the Kohen Gadol. But ultimately, because he abdicated, so he and Aaron became the spokesman. So therefore, Aaron became the Kohen Gadol as a reward. Initially, Moshe was going to get both. He was going to be the leader of the Jewish people and the Kohen Gadol. But God split the duties back in Egypt, and he split the duties now. So 7 for 7. It's called in the words of the Talmud, midah keneged midah, that God judges, God treats us measure for measure. And it's explained that in Tanya, a great length, the book of Tanya, written by the first Chabad Rebbe, Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Rav, as he's called in the non-Hasidic world, that you want God to be compassionate. You want God to be giving. You want God to be caring. You want God to take care of you and your family. So midah keneged midah, measure for measure. You have to take care of God's family, right? You have to take care of God's children, and that's how you draw down blessings. That's how one draws down blessings. So you're kind to somebody. The idea is God will be kind to you, compassionate, philanthropic, this, that, and the other. But if you're miserly, God will be miserly back. That's the idea of midah keneged midah. The Talmud discusses it. The Alter Rebbe says it's now more apparent than ever. This is 200 years ago, how you have to, it just opens the conduit of blessings. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. It opens the tzinner. Tzinner is like a pipe that you want God to be, full measure with you. You got to be full measure with him. And you do that by God. God it's a mirror image, or not quite. It's a reflection. That's what not a mirror image. It's a reflection. And the Alter Rebbe explains it clearly. He says, when you look in a mirror and you smile, or in the water, the reflection in the water, he calls it, and you smile, the water won't just only pick up your reflection, it's going to pick up your smile as well. It's going to pick up your frown. It's going to pick up your attitude, right? And he says, and that's what God does. It's a reflection, right back at you. The energy is right back at you. Good energy creates good energy. Negative energy creates negative energy. So it was on the 8th day. On the 8th day, Moshe called Aaron, and he called his sons, and he called everybody, and he says, Aaron, you're it. You are the now. We know in Judaism that the number 8 is a very, very powerful number. A baby's bris on the 8th day. We know that it says that when Mashiach comes, the harp, that King David's harp, they're going to add a string. It had 7 strings to the harp. To me, to the untrained ear, I don't think it'd make a difference. But they're going to add an 8th string. What is about this number 8? And this is Yom Shemini on the 8th day. So the way it's explained in Kabbalah is that 7 is creation. 7, God created the world in 7 days. The 8th day, the day after the 7 days of creation, is above creation. It's transcendental. So that's why you give a baby a bris on the 8th day, because on the 8th day, it's higher. The whole bris concept is higher than intellect, right? You take a baby, and you cut him, and you cut him there. It's above logic, and you don't ask the baby's permission either, right? You just do it as the parents. So, and it's specific on the 8th day, because the 8th day is above creation, above logic, above the and it's interesting. If you take the number 8 and put it on its side, it's in the infinity symbol, and that's the idea. It's above creation. Creation is limited. Creation is God created on the first day, created this, limited. There was boundaries. On the second day, created this, for whatever reason. The third day created this. But 8, the number 8, symbolizes that there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries. It's above creation. And that's why the string, an extra string will be added. That's why the baby's breast on the 8th day. And here was the 8th day. It was a major celebration, and Aaron stepped up to the plate. The Torah tells us that Moshe told Aaron, Krav, come on, get close. Rashi says that Aaron he didn't want it. He didn't want it. Moshe, this is your gig, right? This is your thing. Why are you mixing me into your thing? God chose you to do this. And Moshe told him, don't you start as well. The reason why I lost it is because of my hesitancy. Don't be hesitant. Don't be hesitant. You gotta get up there and you gotta do it. And we said, if you were in shul yesterday, we spoke about the story about a fellow was a Hasidic Rebbe asked this fellow to become the Rebbe of the city, become the rabbi, the chief rabbi of the city. And the Chassid turns to his Rebbe. He goes, I don't want him. I don't want him. He goes, why don't you want him? He goes, because I'm really not worthy for this, to be the chief rabbi of this city. So he goes, and who should I give it to? Should I give it to someone who feels worthy? Should I give it to someone with an ego? He says, because you're saying you're not worthy, that is the reason why you should be the one to be the chief rabbi. And that's kind of what Moshe was saying to him as well. So there were 2 sacrifices offered by Aaron right away. And that's to address the elephant in the room. The first sacrifice was the calf. Remember, Aaron had something to do with the golden calf. He was trying to stall, bring all your jewelry. And then, right, he was trying to stall for Moshe to come down. But the bottom line is a catastrophe occurred and a golden calf was made. So because Aaron had was involved, the first sacrifice he had to bring was basically to atone for himself for having involvement, and also the Torah says to atone for the Jewish people for worshiping this golden calf. And once again, the worship of the golden calf, there were 2.7 million Jews, 3,000 people worshipped. So while 3,000 is 3,000 too many, 3,000 is, compared to what was out there, was actually very little, right? And they say, the Talmud says, that those that worshipped were actually not the Jewish people, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rachel, and Leah, but rather was the converts that Moshe, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes. They were primarily, they wasn't all, but they were, 80, 90%. So the amount of Jews of the 12 tribes that worship was very minimal, but still it's stuck in God's craw for a few reasons. One is, how dare you, even one Jew. Two, nobody says a word. You let this go by. So there's one person, right, who said something and they assassinated him. So people were afraid. But the problems start when people are afraid, right? It's when you I remember once I was in my younger years. So this fellow asked me, he says his brother is getting married to a Lutheran. He's Jewish, he's getting married to a Lutheran. And is he allowed to attend the wedding? Because he knows it's an intermarriage, is he allowed to attend the wedding? So wet behind the ears, I said, okay, let's call a rabbi in Brooklyn together. So we called the rabbi in Brooklyn. And I said, this is the story, let him speak for himself. And he spoke and he says, no, you can't go. So he goes, Rabbi, I'm going to create a huge conflict with my family if I don't go. And so the rabbi responded, and it wasn't the most, my proudest moment talking with this rabbi, but he said, if you do go, you're going to create a huge conflict with God. That's what he said. So the rabbi was trying to tell him that, at some point you gotta stand up. But it's the idea is that you got to stand up to this golden calf. You got to stand up to worship. And that's why those sacrifices brought not only on Aaron, but on all the Jewish people. The second sacrifice he brought was a goat, right? And the goat was because to atone for the whole descending into Egypt in the first place, right? The brothers, they sold Joseph. And they sold him to the Midianites. The Midianites sold him to the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites sold him back to the Midianites, who business brokers, and they sold him to Egypt, right? But what did they do to convince their father that he was dead? They dipped his coat in goat's blood. And they said, look, so to atone for that deception, for that chickenry, for that hardship and pain, they brought a goat. They brought a goat. And one year it was around this time, specifically around this time, I was in Israel, and I came back to the hotel. I think it was I'm trying to think where I was staying. I was staying in the King David Hotel. I came back Shabbat afternoon for lunch, and we were greeted in the dining room with two carving stations. One was calf and one was goat. And they said, yeah, this week's Torah, calf and goat. So I said, I'll pass, because it was like two, you got any like chicken wings or something? But that was funny. Their menu is based on the Torah portion, right? So thank God the Torah doesn't talk about oxtails. And Aaron offered up the sacrifice, etc., etc. So that was the first thing he had to do, was offer up these two sacrifices. Once it was done, Aaron lifted his hands and he blessed the Jewish people. If you ever come to shul on the holidays, in Israel, it's done every day, but in diaspora, it's only done on Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, and Kippur, etc. Is the Kohanim duchen. They raise their hands, and their fingers are like the Spock move. Those who can't, but the Kohanim that can't do the Spock move, by the way, because they just, they can't do it. What they do is they take a mezuzah scroll and they place it here, and so that sort of separates. And it's Kabbalistic. It's a whole Kabbalistic thing. Is how many there's a bunch of different spaces for God's name, and they bless the Jewish people. May the Lord bless you and guard you. May the Lord turn His countenance towards you, and be gracious to you. Right? May the Lord turn to you and grant you peace. That was the blessing He gave. As soon as He gave that blessing, He then walked out with Moshe to the people, and they gave them another blessing. This other blessing was, says in the Talmud, is may the divine presence move through the work of your hands. In other words, whatever you do shall be blessed by God. Your work. We're talking about if you're a well digger, or if you're a lawyer, or if you're a water schlepper, right? You whatever you do may be blessed. So he says, you just made this whole sanctuary, you just made this whole, edifice, etc. May be blessed. May blessings come through it. I remember when we poured the first concrete for the mikveh. So the rabbi, the supervising rabbi, so he was, they poured it, and then he took a shovel to basically spread out he says, this is holy concrete. This is holy concrete. And he proceeded to say this prayer. And then he gave me a shovel, says, say v'hinoyam. And I said v'hinoyam. That's the same blessing that we make. May the pleasantness of Hashem be through the works of your hands. So I'll tell you something fascinating, is as far as the pleasantness of Hashem working through one's hands, you have to not only have good intentions, you have to be aligned with God. Right? It can't just only be good, your idea of good. In the early 1900s, when the Jewish establishment was getting stronger in the United States, right? It was obviously after the war. After the war, it was a major influx. But we're talking about the 1900s, 1917, 1918 were big years for Jews that came to the United States, right? And the establishment was stronger, and they did many things. They built these JCCs. They built these social halls. They built these synagogues. They built hospitals, right? They built. The one thing they did not build, they would not build, was yeshivas, schools, Jewish day schools. They would not build them, right? If you think about it, there were so many Jewish buildings built in the 20s, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, well, and it just, but no yeshivas. There were a couple of little shtibelach that had, and I think it was one girls' school in the entire New York City, 5 boroughs. So while it's true that the Jewish agencies are an incredible thing, and what they did, what the Federation did in the 20s and 30s, changed the landscape of the country. And my wife works for a Jewish agency. She's a therapist. She's one of 3,000 therapists. I mean, it's huge. The look, the growth, the vision. But it wasn't yeshivas. It wasn't yeshivas. It wasn't the focus. And because of that, we lost a lot of Jews because of that. So a person could do something good, but you want the ultimate blessing. You don't just want a penultimate. You want the ultimate blessing. You want, so that's what I mean when you say, may the pleasantness of the Lord, may you be in line with God. It would have been more beneficial, I believe, for the Jewish people if there were more yeshivas. Would you agree? more Jewish day schools. It would be, and for multiple reasons. I'm actually working on a parenting. It's a parenting, not a parenting book, but there are 6 things that the Talmud says a parent must teach their children, and these six things are just incredible. I mean, if you apply it to today, and yeshiva would teach that. Public school wouldn't necessarily teach that. So so they blessed the Jewish people, and the cloud of glory descended. Right? It was you could see it. It was palpable. God's energy was there. Cloud of glory, whatever that means. And it wasn't like smoke from pot. It was real. It was something palpable. It was the divine presence rested, and that's how the Jewish people knew that all their work over the past months of building this temple, God moved in. It became God's home. By the way, do you know what's the definition of home? Home, I think it was Robert Frost. I think home is where they let you in. That's why Israel's so important, right? It's where they let you in. And that's why British mandated Palestine wasn't really our home. It was our home, but it was they were outside agitators. The Torah goes on to say that on that very day, on the 8th day, 2 sons of Aaron, one was Nadav and one was Abihu, each one they were inspired, right? It was, and they took a pan, they put coals from the altar on it, so it was a hot pan now, and they took incense and they offered it. This is an Eish Zara. You cannot just go into the holies or the holies of holies. There's a debate where they went into. You cannot just do as you wish, right? And enter the holy temple, right? And they offered it, and a fire came from heaven, and it actually burnt them internally. Their bodies were intact, but inside, and they died. Right? And they died. So this is on the day of inauguration, the happiest day. Now, there's Moshe turned to Aaron, and because remember the party stopped. This was a tremendous celebration, and Moshe turned to Aaron and says, "Now I understand what God means when he says that with my closest ones I will be holy." He goes, "Your sons are holy." And Aaron looked at Moshe by Yidom. He didn't curse God. He didn't curse Moshe. He didn't get angry. He accepted it. He accepted, which took tremendous strength. So, based on what Moshe said to Aaron, they try and understand what happened here. The 2 sons of Aaron were no slouches. The 2 sons of Aaron were not, they knew the scoop, right? They knew that you just don't do things on your own, right? And they were also, like, what were they thinking? So we have a little insight by what the Moshe said, that they were the Krova, they were closest to God. They were the closest to God. And then the command to Aaron, right after it happened was the command from Moshe to Aaron. He goes, "Moshe and Aaron, don't cut your hair, don't tear your clothes, right? And don't leave the vicinity." So there's different commentaries on it. Essentially, what happened is that the brothers, when they saw Hashem's cloud of glory, the Hashem's presence descend, they said to themselves that, they said to themselves, there's different interpretations. This is the the one from Kabbalistic interpretation, Hasidic interpretation, they said to themselves that we are being a soul within a physical body is very limiting. If we weren't in a physical body and we could experience, I mean, what we just saw was amazing. If we can experience that all the time, it would be incredible. So they decided that they had such a thirst, they had such a it's almost the ecstasy. Their soul wanted to leave their body, and they made it happen. There was this ecstatic. There's a word for it. I can't think of the word now, but they had, in Hebrew it's called kalois hanefesh. They wanted to die. They wanted their soul to be attached to God without the physical body intervening and being limiting. And in the Kabbalah, it's called Ratzui V'Shuv, that we all have it. We all want to get close to God, but we know that being in a physical body is what we should be doing. That's our mission. So we have to have Ratzui, we have to go close, and we have to have Shuv, we have to come back. They had Ratzui without Shuv. They just went and went and went, and they threw themselves essentially into the fire. And the fact that they, Moshe's instructions, the commentaries explain that there are a few different problems. One, aside from them offering up alien fire, is that they took on positions of leadership, which is when you offer something on the altar, you're the leader for the Jewish people. But there was a problem. They weren't married. They didn't have a wife. They didn't have kids, right? To be in a position of power, you had to be married and have kids. Judaism. Aaron had to be married, and the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur had to be married. Couldn't, if he was single, he would not be. If his wife died right before Yom Kippur, he would either have to remarry quickly, because in order to have proper compassion on someone else, you have to be married and have kids. You know, I always wonder at leaders. You know, we have leaders of nations or leaders of states, and that they don't, you know, they go through life alone. They don't have any family. You know, can they be proper leaders? You know, when one of my thoughts about our vice president now, but it doesn't matter, Republican, that doesn't matter to me. She doesn't have kids. She doesn't have kids of her own. There's a certain, you're missing something. You're missing a certain flavor. If you have kids, I believe you think twice before doing harm to someone else, or bomb another country. I don't know. But, sorry? Not fault of his own, though. And that's why the Rebbe called his shluchim, his kids. Right? Yes, the Rebbe didn't have kids. The Rebbe struggled greatly. And he begged for kids. When his wife died, right after his wife died, he was told that his wife died. He turned to the secretary and he says, "We have to let the family know. Call the shluchim." That was his response. Call the shluchim, call the emissaries. So yeah, I mean, it's tough stuff. Thank God the Rebbe didn't bomb anybody. So they weren't married. They didn't have kids. They also didn't have the proper attire, the proper, you know, if you go meet the king and you're dressed in torn jeans, it's not going to bode well. If you go to the White House, right, and they were drunk. You go to the White House to meet the president. You're drunk as a skunk, and you have, you know, torn clothes, or you know, you're you know, just you know, in jeans, and your pants are halfway down your backside. It's not appropriate. They didn't care about physicality, and that was part of the problem. It's not acceptable not to care about physicality. A Jew, we're a physical, we're a soul in a physical body. We're not just a spiritual soul. God did, neshama is an neshama, but God wasn't happy just making an neshama, this energy. He wanted it in a physical body. He wants you to look good, feel good. The Talmud talks about that if somebody walks with dirty clothes, if you have stains on your clothes, it's unacceptable, and you should be told change, right? Well, what's a big deal? Clothing, it's external. It's got to be clean. You got to look presentable because you're a soul in a physical body, and your physical body has to be presentable. Right? There's big discussions where the halachically whether a person, human being, is allowed to smoke. Is smoking? It's you're damaging consciously your body, and you're not allowed to consciously damage your body. So my response to anybody who's very very emphatic that a person shouldn't smoke. I don't smoke, but if they're emphatic and they're bothered that someone else smokes because of their health, I would tell them, you can't eat potato kugel, right? Because it's not good for you either. Stay off any all red meat, and only have organic vegetables. So you got to live and let live. But the sons of Aaron didn't care. The sons of Aaron, they did not care about the physical selves, and that's a problem. That's not what we should be doing. The souls and physical bodies. Therefore, on Shabbos we have to eat. On Shabbos we have to sleep, and that's why we have to make sure to spend time with our family, and that's why we have to make sure to develop relationships with people and go on vacay and recharge, etc. It's all this stuff is important, and Hashem was warning against dismissing your physical self. You're not allowed to self-flagellate. You're not allowed to hate yourself. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to hurt yourself, cut yourself in order to have this religious, spiritual experience that some people do. Self-harm, and they feel you're not allowed. You're not allowed to. And on and on and on. There were this. I forget who it was. I forget, but there's somebody who told a wise person that he's going to stop consuming this, that, or the other. Right? I don't know if it was vegetarianism, veganism, pescatarian. I don't know what it was. I have no idea. I don't know what it was. So the rabbi looked at him, and the rabbi says, hasn't the Torah forbidden enough that you have to take on extra stuff? Why do that? It's no mitzvah. Now, I get if somebody, it's very clear in the Code of Jewish Law, if somebody is, they can't eat fish, they can't eat meat, it really bothers them. So then on Shabbos, they're exempt, because Shabbos is supposed to be joyous and it's supposed to be good. And if you're going to be nauseous, right, they're exempt. Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, was a vegetarian. He was a vegetarian. Friday night, he used to force himself to eat in honor of Shabbat. But that's him. It's not necessarily everybody. But the idea is that don't restrict yourself for godly reasons. I've told you this many times before. My father used to fast on Mondays and Thursdays, and the Rebbe told him off. The Rebbe says, "Where do you get off fasting? Why? Why are you fasting? What? Hashem gave us fast days, and Hashem gave us things we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Why are you fasting? Why do you take it upon yourself to fast?" And so the idea is alive and well, right? If it's I think in Chassidus they talk about the litmus test. The litmus test is that you're allowed to have, if it's kosher, you're allowed to have it, etc. If you become obsessed with it, then that's an issue. So if you say, I must have matzo balls in my soup, then you should know, stop having matzo balls, because then you're giving too much emphasis and too much importance to these matzo balls. But if you eat them, just regular, that's fine. So it's called iskafia. If you find that it's controlling your life, this certain physical thing is controlling your life, then iskafia, hold back. But otherwise, why hold back? Why hold back? You know, if you're so, if it bothers you that this brand of brownie is not as good as this brand of brownie, then your head's too much into it. Then it's, if you say, okay, this is good, then have either one. But if you're crazed, then that's when you know you're taking it too far. That's the Hasidic teaching of iskafia. There are people who've taken iskafia to, there's somebody who became observant at the Chai Center, and because of his iskafia, he would not eat certain things. He wouldn't, and I told him, stop it. Why are you doing this? But he thought he was being holy. Remember, we're a soul in the physical body for a reason. We have to treat our physical body with respect, and we have to, if it's a delicacy, enjoy it. If you're fixated on it, stop it. Stop being fixated. But a good charm is really good for you. Right? The Torah goes into Moshe and Aaron having an argument. Right? Remember, Aaron he just lost his two sons. He did not. They weren't buried yet. He was an Onan, somewhere in between. Onan is somewhere in between death and burial. It's a very weird. You're not obligated to do any positive mitzvahs. You have to keep. You can't do something negative. But for example, you don't have to make a bracha before you eat when you're an Onan. You don't have to. You're not allowed to violate Shabbat. You're not allowed to violate. You're not allowed to eat not kosher. You're just not allowed. Don't have to make a blessing, etc. And so what Aaron did is Aaron ate the goat and the calf. It was also Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the Hebrew month of Nisan. And he didn't eat that one because that one you offer every month. He said, these two are just for today. I'm going to eat it. Moshe inquired and said, why didn't you eat it? Moshe said, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. You should have eaten it. It's a sacrifice. You have to eat it. Why do you burn the whole thing and not eat it? Aaron explained his rationale. Moshe looked at Aaron and said, you're right. I apologize. The great Moshe knew enough. It says, Vayishram Moshe, Vayita Beino. He gave him the nod. He listened to what Aaron said, and it gave him the nod. Which is, we know Moshe was humble, but think about it. Moshe was being very dogmatic. He was standing up for God. You have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this. And Aaron said, Moshe, I have a different way of thinking about it. I have a different understanding. I have a different. And Moshe said, thumbs up. How powerful is that the great Moshe publicly backed down from an argument, and he acquiesced. And he said to Aaron, you're right. I approve of your logic. It makes sense. That is I think that's a lesson. It's a lesson. It's a lesson for everybody and anybody. Those in positions of power, those who are not in positions of power. It's an incredible lesson. It was in 1986, and there was a major election of importance in Israel. I mean, I guess every election is of importance. Are they going to give back land? Not going to give back land. Every election has a lot of lives at stake, but there was this particular one, and this is the one and only time the Rebbe got involved in politics, and it backfired. It caused a divide between the Orthodox and the unorthodox, and it became a lot of hype. And the Rebbe was just one of many who was pushing for this certain outcome of the election. So as it was getting hotter and hotter, right, the Rebbe told the Israeli shluchim, stop it. No more campaigning, back off. Right? It's not good for the Jews to be involved in campaigning. Right? To me, that's actually he saw that it backfired. So instead of being a kanoi, stubborn and double down, I think it's called, right? double down. Instead of doubling down, he said, okay, I'm out. I'm out. This is causing strife. I'm out. I think that's a extremely powerful lesson. And then Chabad is not involved in politics since. So 1986, we made a lot of enemies in the secular world. It was the only time where Chabad was not really embraced in the, before, let's put it this way, before 1986, conservative and reform shows had, Chabad guest speakers on Shabbat, and they used to invite them. And, once after that fight over a political outcome in Israel, I forget exactly what it was, but it created a divide, and still suffering today from it. And but the Rebbe did step back. The Torah continues, and it talks about kosher. The Torah says these are the kosher signs. These are kosher signs. So an animal has to chew its cud, regurgitate its food, and has to have split hooves. Has to be completely split, not a web, and for it to be kosher. The Torah then identifies 4 animals that have one or the signs. Most animals have either both signs or neither of the signs. But there are 3 animals that have one or the other. The Torah identifies them. So there's 4 animals. We've never found another animal. We haven't found a 5th animal. And that's so this, remember, the Torah was given 3,400 years ago when God told Moshe about these 4 animals. To a world that was, continents that were completely undiscovered. We still haven't found a 5th one. We only have that 4. They explain Kabbalistically what it symbolizes. Chewing the cud, regurgitating, means that you should really think things over before you act on it. You're angry, you want to say something, mull it over. You want to mull it over. You want to make a decision, seek advice. Don't be impulsive. So that's chewing the cud. That's a lesson we learn from it. Also, split hooves mean that it's completely split. You have to know right from wrong. You cannot, the moral gray areas are very tricky. You have to know there's no gray areas. It's black and white. Once you start getting gray, then and blur the lines, you're in shape. It will lead to shaky ground. So split hooves. Completely split. So that was the animals, the Torah. So it's interesting. The only one. So the 3 of the 4 that have one of the other, they don't have split hooves, but they chew their cud. The camel chews its cud, but it doesn't have split hooves. So you look at a camel, you can tell it's not kosher. You look at a pig, however, and this is why the pig is, people say, I would never eat pork. But they would eat non-kosher beef, they would eat lobster, they would eat shrimp, but not pork. But there's a reason for it, because the Torah identifies it by name. The Khasiya. What is the Khasiya? The Khasiya says, I'm kosher, dude. I'm kosher. It's okay. Really, it's not kosher because it doesn't chew its cud. The idea is that one can be lured into thinking that it's kosher, that it's okay to do, it's acceptable, it's the right thing to do. Where really it's the antithesis of what God wants. You can be duped. One can be duped. So I can think of a lot of examples, but they're not all PC. So, yeah, you'll remember the Moonies from the 80s, right? The Reverend Moon cult was a cult. So Reverend Moon, there was a lot of, anyway, so these people involved in the cult thought they were the holiest and best people, and they thought the world didn't get it. Reverend Moon was God, right? Why can you not see it? Why can you not see it? Right? So they were lured in. This is the least PC I can think of. So they were lured in by Reverend Moon and his his cohorts. But really, it was a terrible, it was a cult, and it was likewise any cult for that matter. So you can be told something looks kosher when it's not kosher. It's just not kosher at all. Right? So I think think of David Duke, right? He had a following, and he's just a racist pig, but he had a following because people felt he was teaching the right message, and it was the wrong message, right? In the 60s, back of the bus, and if a colored didn't go to the back of the bus, everybody was outraged. What's the outrage? You're wrong. Why are you outraged? Because they thought. So that's what it means. They thought it was kosher. They were lured into this trap. But really, to put somebody in the back of the bus, a fellow human being in the back of the bus, because of their self pride, which was not pride, it was a self-hate, is not kosher. That's what the pig, and that's why the pig is singled out by any pig, and that's why it's singled out in the Torah. It's the only one that looks kosher, but it ain't. I think any rabbi that officiates at an intermarriage is kind of sanctifying something that if somebody wants to intermarry, get married by the justice of the peace. Don't bring a rabbi into it to sanctify it. Right? That's it looks kosher. Right? The rabbi's up there, makes the blessing. It looks kosher. It ain't kosher. Right? It's piggish. I think there, I did it. As Mark Levin. I said it, Mr. Producer. There, I said it. So that makes sense, Brad? Then there's fins and scales for the fish, clearly identifiable. Has to have, if it has scales, automatically has fins. We're taught if it has fins, it doesn't automatically have scales. In general, when we buy a fish, meat we have to buy from the store, it has to have a kosher, it has to be wrapped, it has to have the seal, it has to be, etc. Fish, you can buy a piece of fish from the local grocery store, the local fish store, the ShopRite, etc. As long as it has one side has skin. If you buy fish, right, and they say I would like 2 pounds of that haddock, right, pollock, that cod, or that whatever, Chilean sea bass, and if it doesn't have skin on it, if it's skinned on both sides, no skin, you cannot buy it. Because where's your sign that it's kosher? Right? And so you buy it, and you take a knife and you trim the ends where it was cut. The reason why you trim the ends where it's cut, because they may have cut it with a non-kosher knife. They just cut shellfish, So you cut it, so that way you throw that both sides out, or just one side, it depends what piece you got. And then it's very easy to buy fish. Right? The Alter Rebbe says there's one fish you don't have to buy with skin on it. One fish, and that's salmon. That if it doesn't have skin on either side, you can still buy it because it's so unique in color, as opposed to tuna. There's other fish that have tuna. Dolphin has a very similar consistency to tuna, and dolphin's not kosher. That's why you'll notice on the tuna can it says dolphin safe, kosher tuna can, because they really weed it out. But the Alter Rebbe says salmon. Not everybody agrees, but being the Alter Rebbe, that's who I follow. I would buy salmon with, even if it didn't have skin on it. I basically go to I buy salmon from ShopRite, and it's kosher, it's been approved, and has the seal on it like the meat has. So it has to have both. The Torah tells us that you cannot eat any bugs, you can't eat any flies and insects, etc. And then the Torah goes through birds. So it's interesting. Birds have no identifying sign. All insects are not kosher. All flies are not kosher. Right? The only time you can eat a fly is if you're, a Holocaust and you're in Bergen-Belsen and you're starving and you see a snail and you eat it. You see a fly, eat it, to save your life. You're allowed to eat non-kosher to save your life. But birds, the Torah says, these birds are not kosher. Anything else is kosher. So and nowadays, the Torah gives names which we think, we think we know the names of. If you look at the Art Scroll Chumash, the stone Chumash, when it translates the birds, right? So in Hebrew, it says the choled, the achbar, the tzav, you can't eat. You look at the English, and it says the choled, the achbar, the tzav. It feels that we don't have, right, 100%. We can say, okay, this is what a choled is. Some people say the nesha is the eagle. Some people say the nesha is the vulture. We just don't know. So therefore, we only eat what we have in Masorah, what we have in our tradition. In our tradition, we have chicken, we have duck, we have goose, we have turkey, right? We have pigeon, I believe is not part of our Masorah, and not everybody eats turkey, right? Not everybody. The Shalah, Shai Levi Horowitz, he wrote a book, Shalah. He was a Kabbalist, so he wrote in his will. He saw a turkey kill something viciously, so he goes, "We may have that turkey's kosher, but I don't want my sons or their sons eating turkey. So I come from the Shalah, but on my father's mother's side, so I can't eat turkey. My sister's husband comes from the Shalah on the father's side, so he won't eat turkey, right? So they never have turkey. We rarely have turkey in our house. And when it comes to Thanksgiving, we eat chicken because we may have other guests that don't eat turkey. But we still, it's in Masorah. It's part of a Masorah. Turkey's kosher, so we do eat kosher. That was a particular request from his son's sons. The Shalah, by the way, is buried right next to the Rambam. If you ever go to Maimonides' grave, right next to him is the Shalah. That's my granddad. So I eat turkey, especially if it has shawarma spice on it, and it's on that gyro. Sorry, right. But I once went on a tour. There were a few Chabad rabbis. This tour company was trying to entice us to use them, and they gave us a heavily subsidized tour. It was like $1,100, including airfare or something, for 6 days. And I sat at a table. There was like 30 rabbis. I was one of them. Sat at a table, and they brought the food, and because it was also came with hotel and meals and tour to show them what they can do. Right. I think it's out of business probably because of this tour. Anyway, they brought food, and somebody says, "What is this?" He goes, "Oh, this is like turkey." He goes, "I don't eat turkey." From the Shalah. The next person said, "Oh, I don't eat turkey because I'm from the Shalah." And then I'm like the last one. I said, "I don't eat turkey because I also come from the Shalah." So they brought tofu, and I didn't eat that either. So I went out for shawarma. But I wasn't going to be the only one. And I also come from the Shalah, but on the mother's side. Anybody, by the way, Horowitz, who's a Levi, comes from the Shalah. Klein, Levi, come from the Shalah, right? It's kind of a given. If your last name is Klein and you're a Levite, your last name, because it was a huge family. And Horowitz, Gorowitz. The Levium, if you're Levites, you come from the Shalah, and you don't eat turkey. The Torah says that if it goes on 4, but most of these birds that we can't eat are birds of prey. But the Torah doesn't give a reason. The Torah doesn't say it's a bird of prey. I'm telling you that it happened to be that the vulture and the hawk and the osprey they're all birds of prey. But that's not a valid reason. We don't know why. We don't know why these animals are kosher, these animals are not. These fish are kosher, these fish are not. We just don't know. We weren't given privy to it. And it's interesting, by the way, if you take beef, even non-kosher beef, and mix it with cheese, you'll have two sins. One, and let's say it's non-kosher cheese, you'll have three sins: non-kosher beef, non-kosher cheese, and meat and milk. If you take pork and mix it with kosher cheese, you only have one sin: pork. It's not beef, and therefore basa b'chalav is only beef and milk. Milk, and when you mix the two, but mixing pork or mixing, if you decide to have some kangaroo meat with cheese, kosher cheese, once again it's only one because it's not beef. Here's an animal that is kosher that will surprise you. An animal that's kosher that will surprise you is the giraffe. Giraffe is kosher, and but good luck slaughtering it properly. Right? Where do you first of all, where do you cut? And anyway, it's gory. So lions and tigers and bears, they're all not kosher. They have kapov, they have paws. The dog has paws and it's not split hooves. You can't eat. That's how the Torah portion concludes, and that's how we will conclude today. God bless. Be well. I believe it has been recorded.